Okay, as we have more and more people coming in, I would say we just get started. So welcome everyone to another CSR guest speaker session, and actually the first one of the newly formed series with a special focus on sustainability. My name is Karen. I'm a manager in the Life Science Division in Cologne, and I'm part of the Global CSR Committee, and will try to moderate this session today a bit. And as you probably all know, we have different initiatives focusing on trying to improve the ecological and social footprint of Simon Kucher that have been formed over the past few months. And this web series actually is one of those initiatives, because as many of us still working from home, we try to extend the scope of these initiatives a bit and provide some insights and maybe some inspiration into how all of us can help to improve the ecological and social footprint also outside of work. And this is where the session today comes into play. And this is also where Gary Oppenheimer comes into play. So Gary, very happy to have you with us today. Gary is the founder of AmpleHarvestorg, a US-wide organization that is trying to eliminate the waste of food by connecting private and community gardeners with food pantries so that they can donate their excess harvest. And in the next roughly 20 minutes, Gary is going to tell us a bit about what he thinks is the root cause of food wastage, what exactly AmpleHarvest.org does to improve the situation, and what in fact all of us can do to help. If you have any questions on Gary's presentation or any comments in general, feel free to use the Q&A function in Zoom, because after the presentation, we reserved some time for a hopefully fruitful discussion and to answer all of the questions that you have. And in one of the first slides, and also at the end of Gary's presentation, you find a QR code in the presentation. And if you scan that with your phone, then this gets you in touch with the AmpleHarvest.org team. So in case any questions are left unanswered today, also feel free to reach out afterwards. With that, I would hand over to you, Gary, and we look forward to the presentation.
Karen, Caitlin, thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here with all of you today. Thank you very much for the invitation. Normally, in a non-COVID world, I would be meeting with all of you in a meeting room or maybe in a theater, but we can't do that right now. So as Karen mentioned, here's the QR code. This is going to allow you to download, if you wish, my card if you want to get in touch with us. We're going to have the QR code up again at the end of the presentation if you didn't have a chance to take a shot of this, but I hope we can remain in touch. So right off the bat, I want to start with a vocabulary issue. We discuss, and you hear this all the time, about food waste or food wastage, and I believe that's part of the problem. We are not talking about food waste. We're talking about the waste of food. Food waste is what the pig slop that you give to animals. The waste of food is losing something valuable, and that's what we're focused on. As Karen said, AmpleHarvest.org is a US-based nonprofit that we create information-based and scalable solutions that focus on food waste and on hunger, both. The solutions have to be simple, they have to scale, and they have to have a lasting impact. Again, our approach is dealing with an information solution, not focused on the food itself. The theory of change behind our work is that we want to reach people who already want to solve a problem. We want to educate them more about that problem. We want to enable them to solve that problem. And then most importantly, and this is what makes it sustainable, we get out of their way to create a sustained solution to the program. So in the case of food waste, the work that AmpleHarvest.org does is focused on solving two issues: misinformation and missing information. And if you would like to visit AmpleHarvest.org/theory of change, you can learn more about that approach. We are also in support of 4 of the 17 UN Sustainability Development Goals. In our case, it is no poverty, zero hunger, good health, and responsible consumption, which includes food waste. The maps below just show you how AmpleHarvest.org has scaled and the impact that we have so far. We'll get into that a bit more in a moment. We have 2 programs. I'm going to share both of them with you today that explain how you can use information solutions to address the waste of food. The first program is actually called AmpleHarvest.org, which is also the name of the organization. And the second one is called Faith Fights Food Waste, which is targeted on the faith community. So in the case of AmpleHarvest.org, the first program, across America in every community, you've got two distinct audiences. You have 62 million people, probably like 30 to 40% of you, who are gardeners, whether it's in a backyard garden or a community garden. And they often grow far more food than they can use. Collectively, gardeners grow enough surplus to feed 28 million people across the country. And unfortunately, we have 54 million food insecure people who just don't know where their next meal is coming from. Those people go to a food pantry in their community and they are largely met with shelves of jars and cans and boxes, but rarely, if ever, fresh food. The kicker is that the people who garden and the people who need that fresh food to remain healthy, particularly during a pandemic, live side by side as neighbors. So in the reason this whole problem exists is when you have a normal food drive, which you've all attended or participated in, you're told to bring only one thing, jars or cans and boxes, but you're not supposed to bring fresh food. The food goes from what's been collected to a regional Feeding America food bank, and there it takes days or weeks to get to the local food pantry, and then it gets to hungry families. And that works just fine for jars and cans and boxes for processed food. But for fresh food, gardeners are not allowed to donate. Why? Because that delay on the bottom from the food bank to the food pantry, days or weeks, fresh food won't last that long. So what happens? All that surplus fresh food from gardeners forced on neighbors and friends or lost to waste. The misinformation that gardeners have had has been that they were told jars, cans, boxes, no fresh food. And the missing information was, where do I donate the food to? And what's the best day and time to donate it? Gardeners, and I speak as one, hate wasting the food. For the pantries, the misinformation was that they thought they couldn't take the produce because they didn't have refrigeration or needed more costly refrigeration. And the missing information was gardeners, they didn't know gardeners wanted to donate, and yet they desperately need the fresh food. The idea that I had 11 years ago in the founding of AmpleHarvest.org was if I enable food pantries to accept the food and inform the gardeners about the opportunity, a solution occurs. You do it by creating a custom search engine of food pantries. You include in it, and this is unique to AmpleHarvest.org, just-in-time logic, guiding the gardener to donate the food hours before the hungry families come in, so the food goes from the garden to the food pantry to a hungry family's dinner table on a same-day basis, no refrigeration, and then educating gardeners nationwide that they can actually donate the food. So instead of being blocked from donating the food, as we have been in the past, with AmpleHarvest.org, the gardener finds a food pantry in our search engine and then donates directly to the to the food pantry, and from there to the hungry families. And that's a lifetime of donations coming from the gardener. It bypasses the choke point and solves the problem permanently. We started May 11th, 2009 with one food pantry in New Jersey. Today, we're working with more than 9,000 food pantries, a quarter of all the food pantries in America in all 50 states, Alaska and Hawaii included. And later this year, we'll be expanding into Puerto Rico and the territories. So given COVID, something that was integral to AmpleHarvest.org, and I never even knew the word before COVID, but it is by default a socially distanced solution because it's not involving teams of volunteers. The gardener gardens herself, harvests herself, and donates herself. So it's a very, very safe solution. The solution itself is Uberizing the system. It's simple, it's super efficient. We have zero logistics on our part. It scales to any town in the country, any community in the country, and it meets the critical needs of hunger and food waste, diet-related diseases, and even climate change. 4 out of 5 gardeners given the opportunity want to donate food once they know that they can, and 2/3 would actually expand their garden if they knew they could donate. Now, we do surveys every 2 years, and these are pre-COVID numbers. What you can see here is that the gardeners are growing 11 billion pounds of surplus food. That's worth 18 billion. It could feed 28 million, but the last number is the really important one. If all the gardeners knew they could donate, all the pantries were connected, the end game solution results in a 58 billion reduction in the nation's healthcare costs. And these are pre-COVID numbers, because now with COVID, we have 20 million new gardeners. This is what food looks like when it comes into a food pantry. This is one of my favorite pictures of just how the food got laid out at the pantry. I'm not going to spend, I don't have the time to spend a lot on this, but bottom line, we have a page, AmpleHarvest.org/impact. And you can see how if you can go to this yourself, plug in a dollar amount, but in this case, I put $100 in. And you can see right here that in the first year, 823 pounds of food would be, servings of food would be donated, but that same $100 donation grows to 1,100. It ultimately, and I'm in the way here, grows to over 250,000 servings of food over 20 years from a single $100 donation. This is what happens when you have a scaling solution rather than a food-based solution. And this was put together by the Harvard Business School Alumni Association. And if you visit AmpleHarvest.org/impact, it explains a lot more about that. Now, the faith program. For those of you who who grew up with a religion or participate in a religion, you know that your faith leader has always spoken about feeding the hungry, taking care of the poor. We'll start with this picture. This is what my hair normally looks like. The average person on the street is not, you're laughing, I'm for real. The average person on the street does not pay a whole lot of attention when food waste experts are talking about food waste. They really want to focus on paying the bills, taking care of the kids or whatever. We don't get through. But once a week, they go to their church or their synagogue or their mosque to listen to a sermon, some spiritual guidance. We realized that if we could work with the faith community, we can get to even more people. And by the way, again, this is all about information. So the problem was that the scriptural guidance across all religions speak about ending the waste of food, except it was never picked up on. It's actually in all the scriptures. The solution was to enable the clergy to talk about food waste from their own faith perspective. A rabbi from the Old Testament, an imam from the Quran, a priest from the New Testament, etc. To give them the information they need, to give them a sermon that they need, and give them calls to actions. To basically use information and let the faith community amplify that. We created a program targeting the Buddhist, Christian, Hindu, Jewish, Muslim, secular, and spiritual but non-sectarian communities. I'm sorry, we started with a single sermon, faithy sounding but faithless. For example, to rewrite as they see fit and then to give as part of their regular service. Again, the focus is on the information. This time it's on spiritual-based information, and we're not a religious program, but because people strongly adhere to the religious faiths, if they understand what their religion says about the waste of food, again, it's another way of reducing that waste of food. What ends up happening is that the pastor learns about the waste of food. They get the sermon. We give them 9 calls to actions. There's material for their religious schools, and then they actually give the sermon. So instead of this, which has a limited audience and a limited capacity to deliver a message, you get this in houses of worship. This program, by the way, is global. It's not just the United States. This can be used by any house of worship, any place in the world. We originally did this just for faith leaders. Then in 2019, we realized there are plenty of people of faith who don't necessarily go to a house of worship, or who do go to a house of worship, but their faith leader isn't going to really be talking about it. So we created a version for people of faith. Now, who knew that in 2020, nobody was going to the house of worship because of a pandemic? So Faith Fights Food Waste works for whether you're a faith leader or you're a person of faith. AmpleHarvest.org's programs have been recognized. I'm a CNN hero, Points of Light winner. We were nominated for the World Food Prize, and Michelle Obama gave a lovely short talk about AmpleHarvest.org and wrote about it in 2012 and 2013. We've had plenty of recognition. We partner with major partners around the entire food sector, including the USDA, the Obama and the Biden White House, master gardeners, the faith community, et cetera. We're working with 200 food banks, 9,000 food pantries on a national basis. So our theory of impact revolves around the idea that we can't do this alone. You have an idea, you spark people's imagination, you spark their passions, and they then take it forward. And that's where I hope some of you are going to come into joining us and helping with the effort. There are things that if food waste is important to you, if hunger is important to you, if climate change is important to you, there are things that you can be doing to work with AmpleHarvest.org to help us move the needle further and, more importantly, move the needle faster. If you know of businesses or enterprises that would like to have a sponsor all the food pantries in a state, in this case, it's Bonnie Plant sponsors every food pantry in Alabama where they're headquartered. We have a program for that where a company can have their brand hot linked back to them, but appear on every food pantry list and seen by both gardeners and, by the way, by hungry people who come to AmpleHarvest.org too. Or maybe you just know of somebody who wants to, in memory of somebody, honoring somebody, or just a good cookie, and you want to sponsor a food pantry in your own community. We have that also. We're always looking for more corporate partnerships, and these are just a small sampling of the wonderful organizations that have stepped up and said, we're going to work with you, AmpleHarvest.org. We're going to help increase awareness. We're going to support your work, et cetera. So we're always looking for new partners. Tell your gardening friends, whether or not you're a gardener, you know someone who gardens, let them know that they can donate food and that the solution to hunger is in their backyard. If you belong to a house of worship, if you're friends with somebody in the faith community, let them know about Faith Fights Food Waste. This is something that is a way of promoting it. Understanding two key things. I want to go back to this for a second. The key thing about AmpleHarvest.org's success is it is viral by nature. It's a terrible word in the pandemic, and I apologize, but it's the only word we have. It's viral by nature because of the fact that it is an information-based solution. So that gardeners telling other gardeners or people speaking to other faith leaders is a way of moving everything forward and basically amplifying the whole process to reduce the waste of food across the country and actually then across the world. And frankly, we're also looking to expand our board. We're working very hard to improve the diversity on our board. And if there are people that you know of who might be wanting to get involved with a program like AmpleHarvest.org, we'd love to talk. Lastly, and I would say most importantly, is we welcome donations online, one time or monthly. It's a great way to understand, to actually change, get fresh food into communities, reduce the food waste in your community. And it is something that makes you a part of the process very, very easily. We've put a special page together at AmpleHarvest.org/SKP. If you want to learn more, if you want to learn about getting involved, please visit AmpleHarvest.org/SKP. The three things that I highlighted, by the way, defining the difference, is an excellent PDF describing why AmpleHarvest.org is different from any other program. This is not hyperbole. The whole approach we take is completely different. It's worth a read. Secondly, the impact calculator. That was that spreadsheet. By the way, that spreadsheet's 128 rows long. You only see about 12 rows of them. So we're not going to bore you with the rest, but that's worth looking at. And lastly, the feedback videos in the bottom. These are videos from food pantries that have been sent to us thanking us for helping gardeners donate food to them. But I encourage you to visit AmpleHarvest.org/SKP. So I want to thank you very, very much for your time. As a native New Yorker, I was trying to talk fast to keep the timing down. I think I made it within a minute or so, so we do have time for questions. So I want to open this up to any questions people may have. And lastly, this, by the way, is just a random sampling of pictures people have sent us over the years of food that's been donated to food pantries across the country. So that was my short presentation. And Karen or Caitlin, are there any questions?
Yes, they are. Perfect. Thank you very much, first of all, for the presentation. Very, very interesting. And I liked specifically the part about where you said you, on the one hand, you can't do good alone, and also it's a problem of awareness, it's a problem of information. And we actually also have one question that goes into that direction, and that is asking, why do you think the waste of food per se as a topic is not, or at least doesn't seem to be as much in people's focus as other environmental issues or social issues at the moment, like plastic usage, plastic waste, or also pollution in general?
I would agree with that person, and there are a couple of things. Number one, the discussion of the waste of food, even though it's discussed in the Bible, I'm going to just make that point. It goes back that far, although it's totally overlooked. And you'll, by the way, if any of you are curious, look in the story of Exodus, you'll see it written in there. But the point is, the topic really came to the fore probably 11 or 12 years ago when a wonderful guy named Tristan Stewart in the UK did a TED Talk on it. Before that, I don't think people paid too much attention. And in part, the problem is because food is cheap. You know, if food was really, nobody ever talks about the waste of money. Nobody talks about money falling out of your pockets, and nobody cares about it because money has some value. But people treat food as though it doesn't have value. The real impact is that the food that we waste is exacerbating climate change. It's a missed opportunity. It messes up the environment. And the worst case is when we're wasting fresh food that food insecure families really need. Diabetes is running rampant in America, as is obesity. And they are terrible in terms of both the health and the economic impact on the country. People who are diabetic or are at risk of diabetes, fresh, healthy food is a critical, along with exercise, but fresh, healthy food is a critical tool to either not become diabetic or to manage your diabetes. And by the way, I'm speaking as a type 2 diabetic, so I know what I'm talking about. So the more that we can get surplus fresh food to food pantries, to get to hungry families, the healthier the community and by extension, the country actually becomes. And also the wealthier we become because we spend less on healthcare costs. So it's a relatively new topic. I think also that the food waste is something that we all do. I'm going to go beyond the garden food waste, but we all do it. We get too much food on our dinner plate, we toss it. We buy food in the supermarket, some of it goes bad before we use it, we toss it. There are all these things where we as individuals, as well as corporations and the farms, everybody is contributing to the waste of food. But it means it's unlike plastic. You individually can't force a company to stop dumping stuff into the oceans, for example. You can't yourself stop a polluting factory from polluting the air. But you yourself can stop the waste of food in your community, in your company, in your school, in your house of worship. That's something that you can actually do. I think the big thing is an education thing. I'm also going to add to it that by and large, the discussion of the waste of food has been focused on farm to table. AmpleHarvest.org brought in garden food waste, which is a whole new topic. It's new, except to the 62 million people in America who are gardeners, who know all too much about it, but never thought it went beyond their own garden. So it's a growing topic. It's very important. The Pope spoke about food waste. I'm going to think this was 3 years ago. I actually had a meeting at the Vatican 2 years ago about this. So it's at the top of the radar for a lot of people, including the USDA and the White House also.
Caitlin, you want to go on with the questions we got?
Yes, sure. Thank you. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Caitlin Henning. I'm an associate consultant at the Singapore office. Thank you for your question. We just wanted to ask this question from the audience. The question is, how do you deal with seasonality? As in the winter, there's probably much lower garden production. How does that work for your organization?
Okay, that's a great question. The answer is it's the wrong question, and I'm going to explain why. We are not a feeding program. We're a food waste alleviation program. Okay, I'm going to rephrase the question. What do you do with a storm sewer on a dry day? Nothing. The storm sewer is there to take the excess water off the road during a rainstorm. On a dry day, you never look at a storm sewer and say, what a waste of public money. You just wait for a rainy day so the road doesn't flood. This is the issue, that our job is to make sure that food that would have otherwise potentially gone to waste in gardens gets to people who otherwise wouldn't have it. Our mission isn't to make sure that people have fresh food all year long, because that's what feeding programs do, and we're a food waste program. This is a topic that comes up a lot because most people are focused again on food and not on the waste of food. We're trying to focus on just dealing with making sure that the fresh food in the communities doesn't go to waste. If in the winter there's no one's gardening and there's no waste of food, then it's like a storm drain on a sunny day. We are at work, by the way, because the other thing I should point out is that we all think very provincially. So I'm in New Jersey. No gardens in the northern tier are yet really producing. But in the southern tier of the country, Florida, Southern California, Texas, it's a 12-month growing season. So in different parts of the country, people are gardening all the time. But it's a good question. It's very, very common. Again, our job is to make sure food that might have gone to waste doesn't. And the result is that people get fed that food. The winter food, it's up to the other people to figure out how to better feed people in the other times.
Okay. I think we have time for one last question, maybe. And another question we got